Welcome to all listeners. My name is Carol Sutherland, and I am the VP of Services and Finance at the Continuing Education Student Association at Ryerson, CESAR. I will begin with a land acknowledgement. Toronto is a dish with one spoon territory. The dish with one spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, the Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and people, European and all newcomers, have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. Joining me today is Dr. Alana Butler. Welcome, Dr. Alana.
Thank you, Carol, for inviting me.
Okay, so Dr. Alana is a PhD, is an assistant professor in the Faculty of Education at Queen's University. In 2015, she graduated with her PhD in education from Cornell University in Utica, New York. She joined Queen's University in 2007 and currently teaches at the at-risk concentration in the Bachelor of Education program. Her research includes, her interests includes the academic achievement of low social economic student, race and schooling, equity and inclusion, and multicultural education. Prior to joining Queen's University, she taught at Ryerson University of Toronto as a part-time lecturer. She is currently the chair of the Queen's University Council of Anti-Racism and Equity UK. In 2019, she was awarded an Insight Development Grant from the Social Sciences and Humanity Research Council for a study on post-secondary access for low-income youth. Thank you, Dr. Alana, and welcome.
Oh, thank you.
It's good to see you.
Yeah, it is good to see you again. It's really good to see you. Not so nice to see you, Carol.
And to be back with us in this capacity.
Yeah. It's so nice to be back in this capacity. I mean, I have things that I want to say, and maybe I will just say it. So yes. First of all, I want to start by thanking you. I want to say that when I started at Ryerson in 2008, I think, as a part-timer, and Carol Sutherland welcomed me with open arms. You were a presence on the campus. You really were one of the people who made me feel welcomed. And that's one of the things that I remember about you is you made a point to make people feel welcome and included. And that's what we need at Ryerson. So I just wanted to thank you. And we're friends, of course. We've been friends for years, and I really appreciate and value all that you do for the community and for the Ryerson and the larger community. So I just wanted to say, I appreciate all that you do.
Thank you. And I am so impressed that you're doing the things that you love to do within Queens and really working with, with low income youth, because this is very important. Yeah. And as you know, if as much as CESAR is a mature part-time degree, our student range, the bulk of our students is still considered youth. And we really want to be able to reach everyone, but to talk about what is happening in technology in a time of COVID. So thank you, welcome again. And I will get into the first question. And what has it been, the impact of COVID and isolation on students?
Yeah, well, I think we can probably guess, but we can all surmise what that might be. But from personal experience from students, it has been very isolating for students. I think that there has been a transition. I think, there's been a change in students' responses. So when I was teaching in March when COVID-19 first became a global pandemic. And at first the students were panicked. So they were very uncertain. Nobody knew what the extent of the virus was in terms of transmission. We didn't know a lot about that. So I think there was a lot of uncertainty. So some students were afraid to leave their homes. They were isolated and afraid. As things have gone on, people are now changing, but there are still restrictions, and there's still the isolation that students are dealing with right now. So a lot of students, their only contact with a professor like me is by Zoom. So I have found many of my students reaching out more for support and help because they feel isolated. Some of them are alone. Some of them are maybe with other family members, but they are away from their friends. So they miss being with their peers in the classroom. They miss being with their, believe it or not, I think a lot of them do miss the professors too, even because they miss that, human contact because you only see them by video. So the students are really, the isolation is definitely something that has come through from my feedback that students have given me. They feel isolated, and in some cases it leads to depression and anxiety. So I've had a few students tell me that they feel depressed, and I've have resources available to share with them, like where to go for counseling and where to go, because I can't do it all, you know what I mean? Like I'm not a degree in psychology, Carol, but I'm not a counselor. So
Yes.
I can't do it. So I'm like, I'm not qualified to handle. So I give them the resources that they need for that. But I've definitely had some students, some of them even cry on the Zoom that they're very depressed and isolated. So I try to make sure that I have on hand the phone numbers and emails for the campus counseling for them.
And that's so important. So thank you for that, because it's hard. It
Mhm.
really takes a turn on your mental health.
Yes.
People always say sort of this social impact when, because you miss hanging out with your friends, you can't
Mhm.
talk with people really, everybody's scared. Could it have, because it's sometimes in some household just three generations
Yeah.
living in the same household, so you can't really,
Mhm.
go out with your friends because you don't want to get your mom sick or your
Right. Yeah.
grandparents sick. Um, that's really hard.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, I have a student who is in that situation where she was telling me how she's living with her grandparents, and so she's afraid to go out because so they're over 80, and so she's like, well, I can go out, but then my grandparents are worried right now. So so there's all that situation. I think, like you said, with households with multi generations, there's more of an impact.
Yeah. And it kind of lead right into the second question, like, what
Mhm.
are some of the technology barriers in education students face due to COVID-19?
Yeah, so as we know, there are lots of barriers related to socioeconomic status. So, individuals who are financially secure, they can afford, high-speed internet, right? That's a basic thing. Now, some of our students don't. So low income students, you may be in an area where you don't have access to very high speed internet. So you can't get your lectures properly. You can't access the information. Some of the teaching, like in my university, I'm in a faculty of education. So we are mandated to deliver half of our instruction live. So it's usually through Zoom, or so my classes, I'll have 50% live Zoom, 50% independent work. So that's the rules from the College of Certification. So for some of the students, they have trouble. How many students, every time I have a class, I'll have students say, oh, I'm sorry, my internet in my area broke down. Or,
Yes.
we have a very slow, we have a slow bandwidth in our area. And so I'm not hearing you. I'm only hearing bits and pieces of your lecture. I'm hearing some and not others. Some people are in remote areas and they have less access. We need to think of indigenous communities in the north. And also I have a graduate class that I'm teaching where it's very international. And so I'm very excited to have them, but I have two students who are from the continent. So one, Ghana and Nigeria.
Yes.
Dialing in. So, but it's a challenge because the internet there is not always stable. So they are participating in the course, but sometimes they have some challenges accessing the technology because of COVID-19. So it's definitely uneven. There's regional gaps. People in certain regions can't access the technology, and not everybody can afford it. So I've heard lots of situations where some of my students will say, oh, my brother needs the computer at the same time. And if he dials in, then, it's going to be slow for both of us. So all those things. And if if high SES, if you have wealthy enough, you may not have that problem. But if you are low income, you have very little bandwidth. You only have certain gigabytes a month, maybe, that your plan you can afford. So you have to be you have to be
Yeah.
stingy with what you can afford, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes for some students, it's the cost of paying my internet or eating.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So I've also heard of limited cases of that, where I did not limited cases because I think some students may not share it necessarily, but
Yes.
I did have that case where somebody was saying, because of this internet, I can't eat, or I need to go to the food bank, or I need to beg ask my relatives and friends for food. Because if I'm paying $100 a month for this internet so I can do my courses, that means less for food, so I can't afford things. And that applies for other things like their clothes and other necessities of life that they may need, that they don't, because of COVID-19, they have to spend all their money on the internet access.
Yeah, and what I have been seeing. So earlier on in the pandemic, when the first lockdown, students did not have computers. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of families who have multiple children and in different, and they have gaps. So you
Yeah.
could have like four kids, one in university, one in, grade 12, 11, grade 12, and they have the grade 8 and the grade 5 or the 6. They don't have computers to share,
Yeah.
and they need that. So a friend reached out to me who's a school teacher, kindergarten teacher, and she said in their school, they wanted 45 computers. But in her class, she needed 10 to engage her students. And
Mm-hmm.
they were split class between grade 2 and grade 3. Really formative learning, age. So we did a fundraiser,
Mm-hmm.
and, with the help of CESAR, I must say, student unions are amazing when it comes to helping and really
Yes.
really forward thinking. And
Mm-hmm.
with CESA and other community members and everybody come together, we're able to raise money to get the computers for these 10
Oh, that's
families.
wonderful.
And now the school principal had reached out to me and said, we have uh, so much need. Could you raise more money for? So I
Oh,
had to end up doing a next fundraising with I had to have new friends and them in different categories. So ones I didn't call in the first group, I end up calling to the second, and we
mm-hmm.
get 10 more computers. So that's 20. And
Yeah.
I had to stop because there was other needs that I had to help out. So
Mm-hmm.
there's always this great need for helping, this big gap, and you could really see it. COVID has really shown us this big gap between the have and the have not.
Oh, yes. I think that's what the legacy of COVID-19 will be, definitely this gap, right? The gap in socioeconomic status, also, I guess, as a going along with that too, gaps we see in marginalized populations like the Black population, Indigenous populations, which are disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. So I think we also see, and those gaps also being apparent to us in who is which groups are more vulnerable to getting COVID-19 themselves, and having access to treatment and care and things like that too is important. So lots of gaps, inequality gaps that we see.
Do you find a lot of your students or some of your teachers reach out to you? Because I find a lot of the students are reaching out to me
Yes, yeah, they
privately.
do. Yeah, they do reach out privately, requesting chats on usually by Zoom or something, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
over the phone, sometimes over the phone, but Zoom. Yeah, they do reach out because they're looking for support and help. And it's sometimes it's economic, sometimes, as you said, it's isolation, depression, kind of feeling lost.
Yes.
Especially in the beginning. In the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of students felt lost. Like they were like uncertain what to do, if they should even continue in their programs, because some of them were saying, I don't know if, if this pandemic is so bad, maybe I won't have a job. Like maybe the economy will be so affected, I won't even get a job. What's the point in getting into more debt? So they would ask me things like this, what will happen in the future for me? I need to find a job. And maybe the economy, if the economy it goes down, I won't get a job. So those are kinds of things that they worry about.
Because so yesterday I had two interesting phone calls, and they were both recent grad students, but and they were having a hard time to find jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So they moved home, and home is not really was safe to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to move back home, and
Yeah.
the 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 stress level that they're going through of not having a job
Yeah.
and this not so much of a safe environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I will wager to say not a safe environment.
Right.
Um, but I've seen a lot of that. This is not um it's not it's nothing new now. I find
Yeah.
when students really reach out to me privately, it's Miss, how could I cope with this? Miss,
Yeah.
what my future look like? Miss,
Mhm.
I need to get some things, but I just can't afford it.
Right, exactly. So a lot of them I find are reaching out, for resources and things. So what I found is that I have to make sure that I have resources available at hand,
Yes,
or if I don't know the answer, sometimes to be able to say, okay, here, this is a resource that you can go to. But some of them I find, sometimes it could be Carol, they just want somebody to listen to them sometimes.
yes,
No, right? Like I
yes, it's
feel
the
like
truth.
sometimes they just want a friendly ear to
Yes,
listen to them and hear, what they're going through. They just want to talk
yes,
because they're isolated.
yes. Um, I had one early on this week, and all the student wanted to do was for me to just listen.
Yeah.
Just listen. And I said, what do you want? No, I just want to tell you thank you, because I feel like, my parents is not listening to me. They say, go out there, make it happen, make it happen. You are educated. And they're
Mhm.
saying, well, there's nothing out there. So that they just wanted to
Right.
just, you know,
Mhm.
offload. And that will lead right into the other question is how COVID-19 affect BIPOC student.
Yeah.
Because
So yeah, so that I'm actually just now, like literally just before this call, I was involved with an email for that because there's going to be, my university's having a meeting of the administrative leaders on the student experience after COVID-19. And so I'm speaking to the experiences of BIPOC students. So I was reaching out to the student groups, the Black student
yes,
groups, Indigenous groups. And so the response, of course, as you can imagine, you mentioned it earlier, you hit the nail on the head. It's the disparity. So because we know BIPOC groups, many are more likely to be low socioeconomic status, so it's hit the BIPOC population even harder. So I mean, we have students who, very sad situations, their parents out of work,
yeah,
the parents, both parents lost their job due to
yes,
COVID-19. We have some Black students who they're struggling with, can they even stay in the program because they both their parents lost their jobs. Indigenous communities up north being hit by COVID-19 and the impact. So for sure, there's a severe economic impact for COVID-19 on BIPOC folks. And as we know, the medical research says that, especially Black and indeed Black in particular, people are more likely to get COVID-19 in the first place because of jobs, the jobs that they are putting themselves at risk. You know, like I think we had a conversation early on in
Yeah.
the pandemic where we were like, who can stay at home? You know,
Yes.
I mean, I'm privileged to have a job that I can work from home. Some people, they have to go on that job every day. If you're a cashier, if you're doing something in the front lines, you know, you have to be there. And in many cases, some of those workers don't get PPE equipment unless you're in the hospital. But if you're doing like other work, like, you know, we know Black people, Black women in particular, are high concentration in personal support workers, you know, retail, like time of front facing service worker jobs, that Black women are disproportionately in those jobs, so there are more risk. So they say that due to that factor, they're more likely to you know, get COVID-19 in the first place. So they have shown, research has shown that that is the case. In the US too, we see that racial disparities, and it's because of various factors, but related to like the work that you do. So I think that's really important. So a lot of our BIPOC students are struggling, and the financial piece is really significant because I remember that student, you know, both parents lost their jobs. So you can only imagine the student what they're going through. Right now they're living on the loans, but you know, the student is wondering, how long can the loan last me if my parents can't contribute anything? I might have to leave school.
So, I look after CESAR grants and bursaries. So every day, emergency grants come in, there's always a need.
Yeah.
But I was looking at the bursaries, our winter bursary, and I had to read 200 bursaries.
Wow.
And this is a small group because sometimes, uh, like last fall, we had, over 4,000 students apply, and we had to break it down to about 32 students, 3,200 students, and plus, out of that, give them grants. So,
Mhm.
bursaries. But what happened in this last one I was reading, so I'm going through, it's a need, mental health. Mental health is
Mhm.
really take a toll on students. But two really stuck out for me.
Mhm.
And one of them was one of our students that have a brain tumor.
Oh,
So they can't drive anymore.
yeah.
For stage 4.
Mhm.
So you're on borrowed time.
Yes.
And the second one, mother have an active brain tumor. So two terminally
Yeah.
ill.
Yeah.
And they're applying for our bursary, which we had to spread our bursary out. Instead of giving 500, we end up giving 300, so more people will get.
Yeah.
And you will not believe how that 300 is making such a big impact.
Yes,
They,
and the thing is, you have to turn some down because you can't give
yes,
everybody. So I think that's a really hard job, Carol. I wouldn't want to have to be in that position because it's so difficult because there's so much need.
so much need. And a lot of our students who is living way up north
Yeah.
is feeling the impact too. You know,
Mhm.
I had a mom in Saint Sue Marie,
Yeah.
and just $300. This student was like, every thank you when the money coming, thank you when it's coming, thank you. And I have to say, okay, but we're gonna get there. How to do it? Because a lot of
Yeah.
students don't even know how to. They don't even have the email. The
Right.
e-transfer, how to set it
Yeah.
up. They
Yeah.
have problems. The
Mhm.
need is overwhelming.
Yeah, it's an overwhelming need for sure. And I know at my institution too, the student affairs people have said that they have had, you know, twice the number of applications for bursaries,
Yes.
emergency bursaries. And, you know, there's a group, which is so nice. Here's a nice story, a
Yes.
positive story. I found that there was a group of students who they actually volunteer to get donations of food for some of the students who are struggling with food, right? I found out on campus. It's so nice. There's a group of
Yes.
students. Yeah, I don't know what they call themselves, but they just deliver food. They have a food drive, and they gather donations from food, and they actually deliver to students who need it. So they actually, once they find out a student is in need, they actually go and they give them a package with food and things, because there's a need, on campus. There's a real need for it. So I donated to them too, quite
Yeah.
recently. I gave them a donation, but they have been doing that since COVID-19.
Yes.
They've had to do it. Yeah.
So I belong to a Black caucus group with all the students across Canada,
Yes.
all the universities, all of them come together and they have this chat, hundreds. And they always have something going on. And I'm always donating for that, because you know what? They're on the ground.
Yeah.
They're on the ground.
Yeah.
And they know what is going on in the community. They know what is going on with the student. And when I see that, and I find too, a lot of my friends who want to help, they just didn't know how to help.
Yeah.
So I have no problem in asking. So therefore, what we get, we were able to get some, and some professors, especially in the service community department, the social work department at Ryerson, they give me some, they help me out. And it was really nice that I could have take that money and distribute it and to help, and in so many different ways. Because people want to help, they just don't know how to do it at times.
Right. Yeah, it's very true. Yeah, I think so. I think lots of people want to help too. It's just a matter of like outreach and figuring out the ways to get the, help to the students or families that need it.
So your student group that is doing the food drive, is it on campus itself?
Yes, on food drive on the campus, because they're
Wonderful.
for students who are stuck there. Due to COVID-19, some students ended up being stuck on the campus because they could be international students. No flights are going anywhere. That's actually a big thing I wanted to mention too. This
Yes.
impact for the international students, this has been very difficult. Very difficult. I've heard some sad cases. There's a case of a girl and her, like, she had a family die or something, and she couldn't go because there's no flights, because they cut off flights to some places.
Yes.
So losing your family members. So for international students, they are stuck because some of them cannot go, because they can't get flights to safely go. Like, they could be from some places where they can't accept international flights, so they're stuck, and they lost their jobs. Sometimes some of them were working in the campus dining hall. There's no
Yes.
cafeteria open. No cafeteria open, no job. So some of those students are the ones who are the most need they found for the drive is the international students. And the bursaries have to also, they have a big program for the international students to give them bursaries, because they're the ones having some of the most food insecurity on our campus, are the international students who are really, really struggling with COVID-19.
It is, it is absolutely so, because my friend in Brock University reached out to me and asked me, she said, Carol, do you know anybody that we could get some money from to help the international students at Brock?
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, what? She said, yeah. She said, it's really hard. And her
Yeah.
son, who was on staying on resident, and he used to work, just doing shelving at night at Walmart or one of them places. His job is gone.
Yeah.
So it's really difficult. So yes, I'm glad that you mentioned international student, because being
Yes.
away from home and isolated and having
Yeah.
food insecurity and
Mhm.
money, because
Money,
this is a
yeah.
worldwide
Yeah.
pandemic.
Right. And a lot of them have lost their campus jobs because their campus jobs were something to do with food service or something like those jobs. And those jobs are not there because all the cafeterias are closed. Everywhere the food places are all closed down. So that used to be a big job for the students, right? And they don't have the students. They don't have they're not doing campus tours. They
Yeah,
used to hire
yeah.
students to give tours of the campus. That's not a job there for them. So they have lost their opportunities to have income. So they're really struggling with, a lot of food insecurity. So the bursaries, are really important, especially for our international students.
So with technology can be just a distraction and challenging when students when they tune out, right? To spend more time checking out social media.
Yeah.
How are they how that is being impactful, how that helping these students in the sense of the impact on the student. Because you in a class, you have hundreds of students in a class, like some students will have. And
Yeah.
then they keep, they're on Zoom, but they also have the,
That's true. Very
the
true.
phone,
Their
you
or their
know?
tablets or their
Yes.
tablets or something. Yeah.
So how do you see that is happening in form of concentration in the classroom?
Yeah, I think that it is definitely a distraction. Depending on world events, when there's a big
Yeah.
event going on, it's even more distracting. But it is typical for students to a lot of times they will be on their Zoom class, but they may have something else going on, whether it's their tablet or their phone. So I think that it's a challenge to. I think it's even more challenging for instructors to get that attention because there's so much distraction from and they have other windows open where they could be listening to the lecture. Maybe they're listening and they're doing other things at the same time. So sometimes they're
Yes.
doing that and it's difficult, but whereas in a classroom situation you could kind of see that and maybe set a boundary around that. Like you might say, okay, let's close our laptops now and let's do this activity. However, with the Zoom environment, it's more distracting with technology and plus two, given that what we spoke about earlier, since so many students are isolated, the social media and all those things are the way that they're keeping in touch with their friends through Instagram and things that they're on Twitter, those things that they're trying to connect and reach to their friends. So that in one sense I really don't blame them. I don't blame them, because I have empathy for the students, what they're going through right now. So I tend to be really lenient on that. Like, okay, because I'll do a Zoom and I'll call somebody or we'll do an activity and this, hello, are you there? Because when you do the breakout rooms, and there's something where you can do breakout rooms and you put them in the room and
Yeah.
sometimes they're not there. And I'm like, hello, are you there? And sometimes they'll say, oh, yeah, sorry, miss, I was just doing something. So they, yeah, I give them a break when it comes to that. But yeah, with isolation, there's very much of a gap in the attention span is divided these days because everyone is, especially in the early days, every day they were giving you, oh, there's 300 more cases today, 500 more cases. So it's so like you could just be caught up in listening to all this stuff. Now the stuff is all about vaccine. When are people going to get their vaccine? And that's the news now. Is everyone is you notice the news has shifted from how many cases
Yes.
to where you can get a vaccine. So now the news is like, okay, when can I get this vaccine done and things like this now. So now their concerns are around, okay, when is it going to come for the young people? Because we're at 85 people, 85 years old now, folks. And then they say people in the 60s by summer. So I don't know, the students maybe will be September. I don't know. We hope. So we'll see. But I have some students who definitely would like to have a vaccine. And you don't want to have to wait till another 6 months. But what can we do?
Yeah. Yeah. And, and it's so true. But you know what? The vaccine is great because it's a more hopeful message.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think I mean, schools are depending on that rollout to open or not, right? So the whole public health rollout of the vaccine will determine whether we have in-person classes in the fall in Ontario, right? So that's a big deal. So it's very, very important.
Yeah, I really do. And I've seen it too with my son.
Mhm.
Like, he's in college and he's studying and he is also on the phone.
Yeah.
And I, you know. And every son asked, because we don't have him in his room, we decided that we want to be in an open space that we could, you know, check on him, he could check on us. I don't want to put him in, you know, just do everything in your bedroom. It's a next level of isolation.
Yes.
And so I could see him on the main floor, but it's so interesting because he have all these devices around him, and I have to say, how are you concentrating? Mm-hmm. And then he said, Mom, you know, my friend having a hard time, or I wanted to talk to someone. Okay, I'll put it aside. And I don't argue anymore because I realized that, you know, where's the socialization, right?
Yeah, exactly. That you know, they need that piece. So I think that's why I tend to be a little lenient with this as an educator because of that, you know. And I think I remember listening, this was a long time ago, but I remember at Ryerson there was this talk given by IT services, and they were talking about the capacity need. And they said, you know, the average student, when they're around, they are connected to at least 3 devices. And I can only imagine now. Yeah. So they have their phone connected to Wi-Fi. They may have a tablet, plus they have their laptop. And that's the average. The average student has like 3. So I think, like, you know, we tend to, like, the young people now, like the young ones in their 20s, they're used to juggling. They've got their phone, something here, tablet, something going on, their laptop, something's going on. So I think they're used to that. They're used to it a little bit more than we are. So I think that's another thing that's to note, is that they were kind of born with the technology being a little different. So I believe that they can actually juggle things or toggle a little bit more than some of us can. So I think that's a thing. I do think it's a generational thing. I really do. Yeah, it is. I do think it's a generational thing. I think the young people now, I can see them, they just go from one to the other very seamlessly. And whereas us is like, what? There's this, and oh, let me see. I have to log on. Let me see. Let me see. What's the password I have to do? But then, yeah, it's really interesting to see. So I think that's a big piece. And also the kids being isolated from the school. Like one of my friends has a daughter, and she was telling me how COVID-19, her daughter was crying. She's 8, she was 8, and at the time but she was crying. You know, she was crying because she missed her friends and she wanted to be in school. So there's like that. Yeah.
That little social friend thing, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so cute. Across from my house, there's a school, and you should see how they're so happy, and they know the mask is on, and they chatted. But and when it was closed down, I missed them. Yeah, when they had to go back into isolation in the second wave, I missed just seeing those kids.
Yeah.
Because it kind of normalized things for me.
Yeah. Yeah. When you see them with their little masks, they look so cute.
Yeah.
They do look adorable with their little masks on. They look so cute. Yeah.
And they're going through that. So that's really good to know, because I get fatigue. I get really, really, really fatigue when I am on a lot of Zoom. And
yes, we do. Yeah. Everybody says that's a whole thing. You can just Google that. Zoom fatigue. And especially for those of us like in my particular role, you know, as a faculty member, you know, I teach, but I also have lots of meetings and I have lots of research. And so we have Zoom meetings and things like that. So, and everyone talks about Zoom fatigue. So there are times when it comes to friends, like, you know, if I talk to you, Carol, after this, I might say, can we do it by phone? Because I've been on Zoom all day.
Yeah.
So I might just say, you know, let's do a phone call, because, you know, Zoom is a lot. And I feel like I've been on Zoom so much. So that's a
yeah, I feel that way.
Yeah.
I feel the Zoom.
Yeah, you do.
I feel the Zoom fatigue.
But what they said what causes it. I'm just quoting a colleague who knows what and the colleague was saying the cause of it is because normally when you're talking, you're not looking at yourself. And they say looking at yourself is the stressful. It adds a stress because you're looking yourself, you're looking, wait a second, how am I making up my mouth or my hair?
Yes.
You know, but what you're not, you're more conscious of yourself. and that is stressful, that in and of itself. And also the glare from the computer, the lights, like right now, if I don't have a light shining on my face, it just shows like a black blur.
Yes.
Like so, with the Zoom setup. So I have to have a light that is, illuminate my space so that everyone can see me. So all those kinds of things, right? So you have lights around, and your eyes
Yes.
can get tired of the lights directly in your eyes.